Year 1470. In the mountains of Thessaly, a bell rings for the last time. Its sound spreading through the valley will never be heard again. Inside the Monastery of Saint Catherine, 23 women kneel in prayer. Their lips move in unison, murmuring words they've repeated every morning for years. But this morning, those words leave a different taste in their mouths, like ash, like farewell. Beyond the stone walls, the horizon is blood red, not from sunrise, but from the banners of an empire that has swallowed entire kingdoms. The Ottoman army isn't actually marching. It flows like a river of steel and fire, erasing everything in its path. Head Abbess Alani clutches a silver cross that has survived 3 generations. Her hands tremble, but not from fear. She knows what's coming. They all know. There's only one thing they don't know. None of them can even imagine that death will actually be a mercy. Because what happens next isn't written in any history book you studied in school. It was buried under silence for centuries, erased, covered up, until now. What the Ottomans did to these women wasn't just a conquest. It was something much more calculated, much more sinister, something historians are only now beginning to uncover. The real question isn't whether you can handle the truth, it's whether you're ready to remember it. Missionary letters, Ottoman state records, testimonies buried in Vatican vaults. Every view, every like, every subscription helps us bring one more voice out of the darkness. Now, let's return to that monastery, because the bell has stopped and the doors are about to break. To understand what happened to these nuns, you need to understand the machine that swallowed them. 17 years earlier, in 1453, Constantinople had fallen. Christianity's pearl, the city that had stood for more than a millennium, vanished in 53 days of cannon fire and rivers of blood. Hagia Sophia, once the world's most magnificent cathedral, was stripped of its crosses within hours of conquest. Its mosaics were covered with plaster, its bells melted down. Within a week, from the domes that had echoed with hymns for 9 centuries, the call to prayer began to rise. Sultan Mehmed II stood in the central nave of that ancient church and declared it a mosque. Not because he needed a new place of worship, because he understood something most conquerors don't. You can't defeat a people by destroying them. You defeat them by erasing who they are. The Ottomans didn't just conquer land, they conquered identity. When Mehmed looked west at the scattered remnants of the Byzantine world, he saw wounds that refused to heal. Every bell that still rang, every monastery still standing, every cross casting shadows on conquered soil. These were declarations, acts of disobedience, proof that the old world refused to die. And every nun praying in Latin was a living reminder that faith could outlive armies. So the Sultan made a decision. If they won't convert, they'll be erased. Not through massacre. Massacre creates martyrs. Martyrs inspire resistance. Songs are written. Stories are told. The dead become immortal. Number. The Ottomans had developed a far more elegant method. A method that leaves no songs, no stories, no memory. Erasure. By 1470, this strategy had been tested throughout the empire. Greek monasteries in Morea, Serbian monasteries in the Balkans, Armenian churches in Anatolia. They didn't burn them all. Some were converted to mosques, some were abandoned. But the pattern was always the same. First came the offer, then silence. In Thessaly, the Monastery of Saint Catherine, built on a hillside far from any garrison or ally, was about to become a new test subject. Another footnote in the empire's expansion. But these women didn't know they were footnotes. These weren't warriors. They were women who had spent their entire lives in silence and prayer. Their weapons were rosary beads. Their armor was faith. Most had never seen a soldier, never held a knife, never imagined they would need to. Head Abbess Alani had held this position for 12 years. Before that, she had treated the sick in a village that no longer existed. The village had been swallowed by plague in 1448. She came to the monastery not to escape the world, but to make sense of it. Sister Magdalena was 19 years old. She had taken her vows only 2 years ago. Her hands still bore calluses from her father's farm. She joined the monastery after her family was killed in a raid. It was the only place she'd felt safe since. Sister Theodoros was in her 70s. She had outlived 2 abbesses, 1 emperor, and more wars than she could count. She'd stopped fearing death decades ago, but none of them had faced this. If this moment in history doesn't drive you to learn more, perhaps you're missing the lesson our ancestors died to teach. The most dangerous thing you can do in the face of power is refuse to forget who you are. Now let's see what happens when faith confronts empire. The first cannonball falls just after dawn. It doesn't hit the chapel. It strikes the bell tower. The sound is apocalyptic. Stones scatter into the air. Iron screams against iron. The bell that has rung every morning for 140 years shatters while swinging, and its pieces rain down into the courtyard where the nuns grow medicinal herbs. The same hands that tended those plants now cover their ears, trembling. Head Abbess Alani doesn't scream. She stands, raises the cross high, and begins to sing, "Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy." One by one, the others join her. 23 voices rise against the roar of an empire. But empires don't listen to songs. By noon, the doors break. Ottoman soldiers pour into the courtyard, not with drawn swords, but with ledgers, pens, inkwells. They walk through the monastery not like conquerors, but like clerks, counting, recording, cataloging. Because to the Ottomans, these women aren't people, they're assets. A translator steps forward, a Greek man who once lived in these mountains. His voice trembles as he reads from a scroll. You can hear the shame buried in every word. By order of Sultan Mehmed II, all subjects of conquered territories must submit to the authority of the Sublime State. Those who convert will be granted protection. Those who refuse will face the consequences of rebellion. Sister Alani steps forward. Her face is calm, almost serene. She speaks not to the soldiers, but to the translator. In Greek, clear enough for everyone to understand. Tell your sultan, we already gave our lives to a king. We have nothing left to surrender. The commanding officer, a man named Hassan Pasha, mentioned in Ottoman military records from the 1470 Thessaly campaign, doesn't respond with anger. He responds with something far more chilling, a smile, because he knows something the nuns don't yet understand. The Ottomans have mastered the art of breaking people without killing them. That night, the women are locked in their own chapel. No food, no water. Just darkness and the sounds of soldiers outside, laughing, eating, living, waiting to see who breaks first. 2 nuns, the young ones from Corinth, begin to cry in the corner. Their sobs echo off the stone walls, but Sister Magdalena, barely 20, begins to whisper a psalm. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Then another. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil." One more, and slowly the crying stops. This is the moment when the Ottomans underestimate them. These women had spent their entire lives preparing for suffering, fasting, keeping watch in the cold, hours of silence, submitting to something greater than themselves. What the soldiers saw as torture was the nuns' daily discipline. But Hassan Pasha is patient. He'd seen this before. In Morea, in Wallachia, in the ruins of Serbian monasteries where monks believed their faith would save them. "Faith is like a candle," he once wrote to the Sultan in a letter still preserved in the Topkapi Palace archives. "It burns brightest just before it goes out." About to test this theory. The second day, the doors open. A servant enters with bread and water. Real food, clean water. Leaves it without a word. The nuns stare at it. Their throats are parched, their stomachs churning. The young nuns look to Alani, desperation in their eyes. The oldest, Sister Theodoros, is the first to speak. They want us to take it, to feel grateful, to soften. Alani nods. Then we fast. They don't touch the food. By the 3rd day, their lips are cracked and bloody. Their hands shake. The young nuns can barely stand, but they don't yield. Hassan Pasha watches from the courtyard, arms crossed, impressed, irritated, and perhaps for a moment, something close to respect crosses his face. But respect doesn't change strategy. At the end of the 3rd day, the doors open again. Not the servant this time, Hassan himself. He speaks in Turkish and the translator follows behind him like a shadow. You are not guilty. You are not enemies. You are simply mistaken. The Padishah is merciful. He offers you new lives, new names, protection. All you have to do is say the words, silence, or you can come with us to Constantinople. There the Padishah himself will hear your case. Perhaps your faith will move him. He pauses, letting the words settle. But the journey is long and the weak don't survive. This is not a threat, it's a promise. Head Abbess Alani looks at her sister nuns. Some are barely conscious. Some pray with eyes closed. Some stare at the floor, trying to draw strength from stone. She turns to Hassan. We will walk. The smile returns to his face. Good. We leave at dawn. That night the nuns hold each other in darkness. No one speaks but Sister Magdalena begins to hum. A hymn from evening prayers. One by one the others join. Outside the soldiers hear it. Some pause. Some turn their heads. One of them, years later, will tell his grandson about women who walked toward death singing. But that story too will be forgotten. For now the hymn rises from the cracks in the chapel walls and dissolves into the night. A prayer, a plea, a declaration. We are still here. At dawn on the fourth day they set out. 23 women, hands bound with rope, walking south toward the coast. No carts, no horses. Just their feet, dust, and the merciless sun. The soldiers don't hurry them. No need. The road itself is punishment. On the second day, Sister Irene collapses. She's 62. Her knees have been failing for years. She tries to rise, but her legs won't hold. The soldiers don't wait. Sister Magdalena and another nun, Sister Anna, take her between them and carry her for 3 miles. When they stop for the night, Irene has lost consciousness. By morning, she's fainted. They bury her by the roadside with their hands. No tools, no ceremony, just earth and whispered prayers. The soldiers watch. They don't interfere. Hassan Pasha makes a note in his ledger. 22 remaining. On the fourth day it happens again. Sister Callista, who hasn't spoken since the siege, suddenly stops walking. She sits in the middle of the road, closes her eyes, and doesn't rise. They leave her there. When they reach Volos harbor 7 days later, only 18 remain. But something happened on that road. Something the Ottomans didn't anticipate. The nuns stopped crying, stopped begging. They walked in silence, but it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of women who had already made their decision. Sister Alani, even with bound hands, walked at the front of the line, leading them. But on the morning of the 7th day, Hassan Pasha calls for her. She's brought to his tent alone. What happens next isn't in Ottoman records. It's in a Venetian merchant's letter, someone who witnessed what came after. A letter found in the Dubrovnik archives in 2003. It reads, I saw them bring her back at dawn. She couldn't walk. Her eyes, God forgive me, her eyes were open, but she was no longer inside them. They wrapped her in silks and paraded her through the camp like a convert. But when she passed close, I saw her lips moving. She was still praying in Latin, silently. She hadn't broken. They'd only taken her body, left her soul adrift. This is the Ottoman strategy. History doesn't teach you. They didn't want martyrs. Martyrs inspire resistance. Songs are written, stories are told. The dead become saints. They wanted ghosts, women who walk, talk, eat, breathe, but can never be whole again. Living proof that resistance is futile. Living warnings to anyone who thinks faith can stand against empire. Sister Alani walked the rest of the way to the coast with them, but she never spoke again, never met anyone's eyes. She was there, but she wasn't. The young nuns wept when they saw her. The old ones prayed harder. At Volos harbor, they were loaded onto a galley, a massive warship with rows of benches and chains bolted to the planks. This wasn't a passenger ship. It was designed for control. Slaves, captives, cargo. The nuns were chained to the benches, their wrists locked into iron rings. A ship manifest discovered in 1987 at the Topkapi Palace Museum records them, not by name, but by number. Religious captives, female 18 destination palace. household purpose, domestic service, and conversion. That word service does a lot of work. The voyage takes 12 days. The sea shows no mercy. Storms lash the deck. Salt spray burns their cracked lips. The ship pitches and rolls as if it will capsize, and women who have never seen the ocean vomit until there's nothing left inside them. At night, the youngest, Sister Magdalena, whispers psalms under her breath. Her voice is weak, barely audible over the crashing waves. But the other prisoners, Greeks, Serbs, Italians, men and women chained beside them, turn their heads and listen. For a moment, it's as if the sea has stopped. When the ship finally enters the Bosphorus, the nuns see the silhouette of Constantinople rising before them. Domes, minarets, walls that seem to stretch forever. The city glitters in the dawn light like a blade. For centuries it had been called the city desired by the world. Now it would be their cage. From the dock they were marched through narrow streets lined with merchants, soldiers, and slaves. People stopped and stared. Christian nuns were rare among the captives, even in an empire built on conquest. This was unusual. They were led past the ancient walls, past the palace district, past gardens where fountains sang and peacocks screamed. Then, in the shadow of Hagia Sophia, that great church now a mosque, they were stopped and made to kneel. As the call to prayer echoed from the minarets, one of the nuns whispered, "We're home, but it's no longer ours." They were taken to the palace, but not to the grand halls, not to the courtyards where ambassadors walked, where viziers plotted. They were taken down stone stairs that curved into darkness, through tunnels that smelled of dampness and decay, to a place that officially didn't exist. Not for us, for them, for voices swallowed by silence. Now, let's follow them into the darkness. Beneath Topkapi Palace, there's a network of tunnels tourists never see. Storage chambers, servants' quarters, forgotten corridors that wind through bedrock like veins, and in the farthest corner, a room that's been sealed for centuries with no official purpose. In 2011, during restoration work, archaeologists broke through a false wall. What they found froze them in place. Crosses carved into stone, barely visible, dozens of them. Small, crude, scratched with fingernails or broken pottery shards. And beneath those crosses, 4 words carved in Latin, Lux in tenebri lucet. The light shines in darkness. This was their chapel. For months, perhaps years, these women lived beneath the palace. During the day they worked as silent servants, scrubbing floors, washing sheets, lighting fires for rooms they could never enter. But at night, when the palace slept, they gathered in this forgotten room and prayed. They had no priest, no altar, no Bible, only their memories. They recited psalms from memory. They turned half-forgotten verses into prayers that kept them alive. They sang hymns in whispers barely loud enough for stone to catch. They held communion with bread stolen from kitchens and water from palace wells. And they carved their faith into stone, one scratch at a time, knowing no one would ever see it. Sister Magdalena was among them, the girl who whispered psalms on the ship, who carried Sister Irene on the road, who refused to turn her head when Sister Alani was brought back wrapped in silk. She became their voice in darkness. Archaeologists found her mark too. A small bird scratched into the corner of the wall. Next to it, 23 lines, one for each nun, but only 11 lines were completed. The rest faded into absence. They used broken pottery as candle holders. They made a piece of linen cloth into an altar covering. They fashioned a crude cross from a fragment of broken mirror. In this secret chapel, they gathered every night after the palace fell asleep. No hymns, no sermons, just whispers. Each woman knelt and shared a memory. Home, church bells, the warmth of bread before dawn. These memories became their new psalms, small offerings to a God still listening in darkness. In 1478, a Venetian prisoner held for ransom in the palace mentioned strange sounds echoing from beneath the harem. Women singing Latin songs to a god not of this empire. For centuries, historians dismissed it as superstition, until they found the chapel. But here's what breaks your heart. The crosses stop suddenly. Halfway down the wall, the scratches become irregular, desperate. The lines deepen as if carved with more force, more urgency. Then nothing. An Ottoman record from 1482 mentions a cleansing of palace personnel during the new Padishah's reign. Anyone deemed inefficient or resistant was eliminated. No details, no names, no burial site. Just one line written in neat Ottoman Turkish in a ledger. Disposed of. The nuns of Saint Catherine were erased from history. 18 women who walked 7 days of hell, crossed the sea in chains, carved prayers into stone in darkness. They vanished, but their chapel remained. In 1712, a French diplomat mentioned a rumor circulating among the palace's elderly servants that on certain nights, if you stand in the lower corridors, the air grows cold, and if you listen carefully, you can hear women singing in Latin. He dismissed it as the foolish beliefs of ignorant servants. But walls don't lie. When archaeologists examined the chapel more closely in 2011, they found something else: traces of beeswax. Not from Ottoman candles, from a different source. Older, mixed with herbs. The kind of candles nuns made in monasteries. So they kept their vigil far longer than anyone thought possible. Months, maybe years, carving crosses, whispering prayers, refusing to disappear. Sister Magdalena's bird was the last mark on the wall. Next to it, barely visible, 2 words carved in Greek: "We endure." But the truth is, they didn't just endure. They left something behind that empires couldn't erase. A room full of crosses, a prayer carved into stone. Proof that faith can survive where walls and chains cannot. The Ottoman Empire lasted until 1922. 600 years of conquest and power, but in the end what survived were those scratches on the wall. Not the Sultan's decrees, not Hassan Pasha's ledgers, not the silks they dressed Sister Alani in. Just 4 Latin words carved by women the world forgot. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in darkness. So why does this story matter? Because it's not about religion. It's not even really about the Ottomans. It's about what power does when it tries to erase people, and what happens when those people refuse to disappear. The Ottoman Empire lasted 600 years. They conquered 3 continents. They rewrote maps, languages, entire cultures. They turned Christianity's greatest cathedral into a mosque. They ruled from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. But they couldn't erase 18 women who only had their fingernails and their faith. Think about it. An empire with armies, cannons, endless resources, and the will to reshape the world, against women with only their fingernails and their faith. And the women won. Not the way empires measure victory. They didn't reclaim their monastery. They didn't convert their captors. They didn't live to see freedom, but they left a mark. History is written by victors, but memory is written by survivors. And sometimes survival looks like a cross carved in darkness where no one was meant to see. Like a prayer whispered in a language the conquerors tried to silence. Like a bird scratched into stone to remember the sisters who fell. Centuries later, we found it. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards." These women walked forward into darkness. They walked 7 days knowing they might not survive. They crossed the sea in chains, knowing what waited on the other side. They descended into tunnels beneath a palace, knowing they might never see sunlight again. But still, they carved their prayers, trusting that someone would one day look back and find them. And you did. In 2011, when the archaeologists stood in that secret chapel looking at those crosses, one of them asked a disturbing question. How long did they keep vigil? The beeswax traces suggest years. The depth of some carvings shows desperately repeated effort. So these women gathered night after night, year after year, in absolute darkness and refused to stop believing. Even when sister nuns disappeared, even when the scratches on the wall stopped increasing, even when hope should have died, they kept carving. This isn't just faith. This is disobedience in its purest form. The Ottoman Empire is gone now, dissolved in 1922. Its sultans are dust. its armies, our memory. The palace still stands, but it's a museum now. Tourists walk its corridors, taking photos, unaware of what lies beneath their feet. But those crosses remain, and that barely visible Latin sentence still speaks after 500 years. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in darkness. It's a verse from the Gospel of John, about light that cannot be extinguished, about truth that survives even when everything else is taken away. Sister Magdalena carved those words knowing she would never leave that palace, knowing her name would be forgotten, knowing the world would go on without her. But she carved them anyway, because she understood something empires never grasp. You can conquer land. You can rewrite history. You can erase names from ledgers, bury bodies in unmarked graves. But you cannot kill what people carry inside, and you cannot silence what they carve into stone. You just witnessed one of history's darkest truths. If stories like this remind you how fragile humanity is, how easily voices can be erased, subscribe to Crimson Historians and keep the past alive, because some voices deserve to be heard, even if they were silent centuries ago, especially then. The nuns of Saint Catherine were supposed to disappear. That was the plan. Erase them, break them, turn them into ghosts or converts or footnotes in Ottoman ledgers. But they didn't disappear. They're still here, in those crosses, in that Latin sentence, in that chapel archaeologists found 500 years later. And now they're here with you. Because you listened, because you remembered, because you refused to let their silence be the final word. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.